Changing world order. Welcome to Science Sci-Fi, connecting the public to science and technology through storytelling. My name is Ron S. Friedman. I'm a science fiction writer and an IT professional. And let's dive in right to the topic. First, what's on the agenda? Before I start to talk about the changing world order and the catastrophe that we are waiting to happen, let's just say that I'm very optimistic about the future, but not the near future of the next 5 or 6 years, but longer, like the end of the decade, the early next decades. I think we're going to have a bright future ahead. But until we get them to that point, we're going to have a turbulence and trouble, and there is even a chance for a world war or a civil war where we live. So we have to be careful and be able to survive in the next few years and then reach a very potentially positive future. So what happened in the last few years? We had the Pax Americana that kept the current world order in order. The US pretty much controlled the way the world was going on since the end of World War II. And this is now about to change. We are no longer going to have a single superpower in the world. And we have a few signs of decline that may suggest that we are facing a collapse, perhaps similar to the collapse of the Roman Empire. In addition, in this trip, I'm going to tell a little bit about my trip to Israel. I'm originally from Israel, and I've been in Israel on October 7 during the Hamas attack for a family visit and for a convention, and it's a little bit tied into this story and what to expect in the near future. In the long term, why I'm still optimistic? Because we have a lot of disruptive technology that are about to completely change the world and create a lot of prosperity that could means a much better life for everyone or for most people. We have artificial intelligence, AI, that is going to boost productivity by a huge amount, and it's in the not very far future, it's even going to be more capable than human being. Genetic engineering are going to extend life and also going to create abundance of food supplies. So there's not going to be any shortage of food, and we are going to be a lot healthier and live far longer, live long and prosper. We're going to have cheap, clean energy, renewable, perhaps nuclear, robotics. They're going to do a lot of the boring jobs that we currently do. And we may get to a point of a post-scarcity society that anyone can have basic livings like a house, food, shelter, and maybe internet connection, and perhaps a lot more if we're more productive than that. So what is the basics of the current world order? Up until World War II and before World War II, during the Middle Ages and Napoleonic War and World War II, the world was very brutal. We had brutal war, borders keep on changing, power matter. If you were a strong nation, it was much better for you than if you're a weak nation. If you're weak, you were eaten alive. State competed for power with each other, and war was an instrument of statecraft. I mean, there were negotiations, there were peace agreements, different agreements, but war was very integral part of the equation. The core value was survival. The nation, the people wanted to survive. Was the most important thing, was to survive. And one way to survive is to invade another country and take land from there that allowed you to grow more food and help your people to survive better. What changed after World War II? After World War II, the world became more idealistic, less competitive, more peaceful. Major power didn't fight between themselves. Like there was no world war after World War II between the nuclear Soviet Union and nuclear United States. There were some regional war, but they were a lot more contained and much less war. I think if you look at statistics, the chances of people dying from violence after World War II went down for something like 4.5% to a lot less than 1%, maybe 0.7%. So it's not that war were completely eliminated, but there were much fewer wars. Democracy didn't fight with each other. This was one of the conception. We had globalism, economic interdependency, that a lot of trade. Countries that have an advantage could trade their advantage with other countries. Countries that have oil could export the oil to other countries. They will trade the global route for trade. Well, pretty much not free, but they're relatively safe. No piracy, no nation at war that tried to stop shipping. The US helped create some institutions like the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, World Bank. All these institutions help facilitate peace and facilitate growth. And the core ideology, the core idea was not survival, but prosperity, create prosperity for humankind. And the price was a little bit less resiliency. So country could not provide everything within a country. They didn't try, they didn't strive to have the ability to manufacture. I think they just manufacture what they're best at, or trade, or natural resources, manufacturing, whatever they did best, and then trade what they have and import from other countries what they did not have. And that was pretty good world order. Anyone who tried to break this order had to face the US and their mighty fleet, so the order was kept in place for quite a few years. This world order was actually divided into two periods. The first period was 1945 and in 1991. At that point, we have two superpowers competing to the world resource, but they didn't have a war. They had something like a Cold War, like a competition, but no actual war with millions or billions of death. UN and international institutions were there to facilitate peace or facilitates agreements. And the second period we had is one superpower. Move a little bit so we can read the text. One superpower after the Soviet Union collapse, and they maintain globalization and prosperity throughout the world. So basically, US fleet was helping China prosper by allowing free shipping with no problem from Saudi Arabia go all the way to China and help China prospers. So this is a period of great peace, much fewer wars, less wars. It was a peaceful time in history, backed by the US. And if anyone tried to break the rule, like Iraq invaded Kuwait and said, yeah, we're going to change the border and take over Kuwait, the US said, no, 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 and went to war and pushed Iraq back. The Somali pirates that tried to exploit shipping that went through the Red Sea or through the east side of the Indian Ocean, there was an international force that tried to stop them and stop the problem. Al-Qaeda that went in 9/11 blew up the Twins Tower. The US invaded Afghanistan and Iraq and tried to deal with the issue. But like the Roman Empire, nothing lasts forever. Move my image again. Okay, this is the theory that Ray Dalio, you highly recommended to watch his video. And he is talking how different superpower came into power and then later declined and replaced by another superpower. He believed that the next superpower that's going to replace the US is China. I'm not entirely convinced, but we definitely see some sign that the US is in decline. So according to Ray Dalio, we have a world order, and then you have a building bureaucracy and a lot of rules, a lot of regulation. We have peace and prosperity throughout the world. And then slowly the superpower is start to inflate the currency, get into debt. There is more economic inequality that cause issues, and bad financial situation generates a new conflict. And then you have basically two options: either a civil war or revolution, as Ray Dalio suggests, which is maybe what we are going to see in the US, in North America. And another option is a barbarian invasion. So once the Roman Empire become weakened because of internal processes and bureaucracy and slavery and other issues, it become weaker, and then it was invaded by barbarian. When Israel is more likely to go through the other scenario. So what sign do we have that our civilization is about to collapse? You can see the depth here in this area, the Fed M2 monetary supply. This is the not debt actually, but the amount of money that we have on the system. So dollar, as you know, is not backed by gold anymore, not since 1971. So you can print pretty much whatever you, as much as you want. And you can see the US slowly inflated the currency by printing more and more dollar. The big spike here is COVID. Right now it slightly went down, but as we go into a recession, we're probably going to see the money printer going again. We're going to have a lot of new money printed. The US debt is growing at an exponential rate. Right now, I think it may be 33 trillion. It's going up by maybe 800 billions dollars a month. Currently, let's say the interest rate is 5%. So if you want to pay interest of 32 trillion, a little bit less than 33, that's $1.6 trillion a year, just the interest. As a reference, the whole US income from taxes is 3.6 trillion. So if you have 3.6 trillion and you have to pay 1.6 in debt, but you also don't cut your budget, then the only solution you have is to inflate your currency. And this cannot go forever. We are going to see the system collapsing at some point, unless all the disruptive technology will come before the system collapses. And the boost in productivity may be able to save us. But that's still not a reason why handling the government and have a debt, a high debt ratio, and run a big deficit as part of the budget. Another big problem that's facing the world right now is fertility rate. Within most of the world, the number of kids is dropping significantly. Well, many countries, especially in the West and in the East, are now going below replacement level. That means that each generation is smaller than the previous generation, and that's a problem. That means that we don't have enough young people that contribute to the economy, and we have a growing older population that basically withdraw resources from the economy, and eventually the population is going to shrink if the trend is not reversed. Other economic issue, we already spoke about the devaluation of the dollar and currencies, growing gap between the poor and the rich. People are having fewer children, reduction in trust in central bank and in central authority. People don't trust the government as much. We see stream of financial crisis. Not too long ago, we had the banking crisis that a few banks went bankruptcy, and the government had to save the investors, or not the investor of the bank, but people that deposit in the bank by infusing money, which is basically printed money. That was printed out of thin air. So we have reliance on a small number of manufacturers in the world. We have chip manufacturer right now is going mostly coming from Taiwan, which is one of the area that is very sensitive, and we may have a war soon between the US and China on Taiwan. So if we have a disruption of chip manufacturing from Taiwan to the US is going to be in big trouble. Otherwise, we have a cultural decline, and we have the population is pretty much divided in two. If you can see in the graph here below, in the 1950s, whenever Democrats tried to propose a law, some Democrats and some Republicans voted for the law. And when a Republican proposed the law, some Republicans and some Democrats voted for the law. So law basically were evaluated based on what they are, and people did not vote based on the political party, or at least not only based on that, but they voted based on the merit of the law itself. Right now, this is no longer the case. You can see here a picture from 2011. Today, it's even worse, if it's even possible to get any worse. Right now, when a Democratic candidate proposes a law, only Democratic parliament member, Congress member vote for this law, and vice versa for Republican. There is no discussion or debate about the merit of the law. What's important is which group proposed the law. So we have a big division. Merit, reality no longer matter. What matters is which group you belong to. Social media is another thing that cause division, big division. We have decadence, Nilu tribal ideology that are completely not related to reality, but they are making our civilization and our culture weaker. We see a loss of social cohesion. Anyone think Gen Z will volunteer and go to war and charge the machine gun like in World War I and World War II? I very much doubt that. Jobs today pay less. You say here, this is the growth in GDP. So we see most of the growth went for companies or people who have asset, but very, very little of the growth, if at all, went for people who earn wage. So all the boost in productivity went primarily for property owners and companies, and not so much for the working class. So this is another problem, division and social unrest. Some signs that we are seeing decline and see breakdown in Pax America and in global trade. The first sign is Trump presidency. Trump started a trade war with China. I'm not saying it's all the US fault, but currently we have a trade war. So the US doesn't allow the most advanced chips to go to China and vice versa. In China, so there is now contest. The US don't believe in globalization as it used to in the past, and they want to have able to have more manufacturing in the US, even though it may not create the maximize prosperity, but it still increase the resiliency. But we see breakdown in global trade and global trade routes. We see other competing alliances against the US and its allies in the West, which is Canada, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand. We have the China-Iran-Russia axis right now. That's pretty much the Mongol Empire areas that are contesting the border area between the US and its allies. One contesting point is Taiwan, that is very serious. Another one is the Middle East and Central Eastern Europe, like Ukraine. Another group that is contesting the US dominance is the BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's more an economic alliance. Like I don't see India helping the Russia-Iran China axis in a war. India will stay neutral probably, and maybe even leaning west. But economically, it is not on the side of the US. First thing that we saw, another thing that we saw is the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Afghanistan sits right here in the middle. So this is an area that's in case of a world war with the Russia, China, Iran axis, it will be very, very difficult to defend. So the US withdraw from Afghanistan and it's the redeploying along Central Europe and the Middle East. We'll try to, and of course, East Asia, that's South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, Philippines. We have local wars in Ukraine and in Israel. We have disruption of supply lines. The West currently is boycotting Russia, so a lot of resources, including oil and other minerals, are no longer coming from Russia and natural gas, of course. And we have the Houthis that recently blocking the Red Sea, so supply lines that going from China to Europe, from China all the way around the Arab Peninsula and the Suez Canal to Europe, can no longer go there, so they have to either go around Africa or find another route, which makes, of course, transportation a lot more expensive. And Holland and Argentina have new election, and they voted for a right-wing candidates. What to expect? Other than the US and its allies, no one cares about international laws. Currently, the US cares, Western Europe cares, Canada cares, Israel somewhat cares, or it's a little bit more trigger happy based on what happened on October 7th. But Hamas, Russia, China, they're really Iran. They don't care about international law. It's not even a factor, and all the protests in the West are no, it's not even a factor. So they don't even try to say, "Hey, Hamas needs to observe international law." all the pressure is coming to Israel because Israel is still part of the Western Alliance, so it still adhere to these rules. But generally speaking, most of these rules and laws are in most of the world are no longer relevant. Global institutions such as the United Nations have become powerless right now. The US still help border region like Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and Yemen that cut supply lines to Europe, but they are not going to defend the places that are harder to defend, like Afghanistan, for example. Industry are coming back home. You see the US and the looking more seriously about resiliency, also in Canada. Less global trade, more manufacturing at home. This could also help job market, local job markets that was affected during the globalization. But generally speaking, it's a little bit less prosperity. There's still going to be prosperity and growth, but a little bit less in exchange to having more resiliency. The chances of a civil war because of the big tribal divide in the US and also in other places in the West, there is the chance of a civil war is not zero. It is uncertain. I think Ray Dalio said in the recent interview, I think it's something like 40% chance of a civil war. And the civil war is not going to be like what we saw during the civil war in the 1860s. It's going to be more insurgency and stuff like that, violent protest, etc., etc. But I hope we can avoid that. But you still want to be prepared for the worst case scenario just in case. Also, the chances of a world war are not zero. This is a world war between the US and its ally on one side and the China, Russia, Iran axis on the other sides and their allies and proxies. So we don't know what's going to happen. The chance of a world war, it's maybe 50%. But because of population decline and because of nuclear weapon, it's not going to be an all-out war like World War I and World War II. It was going to be a series of regional wars. We're going to see what happened. I hope it will be fine. And now I'm going to show you a short video clip from Israel from the October 7. I took it on October 8, so welcome to watch it. The following clip I took on October 8 in Israel during my trip. It was one day after the October 7 attack, as you can see on the beach very soon. It's completely empty. The beach is in Haifa. There are helicopters going back and forth. There is a hospital in Haifa called Rambam. So a lot of injured people from around Gaza are being evacuated in military helicopters to the hospital. You can see like a couple of Black Ops and a couple of Sikorsky CH-53, a really surrealistic sights. So here's the clip. So this is it, folks. I hope I'm not too depressing. Stay optimistic. We're gonna have a bright future. Stay tuned and bye-bye. See you in the next video.